recording this, so I'll be talking to the recording. But so we have 30 minutes. It's going to be real quick, so we'll take questions at the end. But I'll try and get through the stuff as quick as possible. Normally, I like to have like an hour to give this sort of talk, but that's okay. So let's get going. It's welcome. Top ways to deliver Java code to the cloud with Eclipse. We're going to talk about Azure. I am a developer advocate at Microsoft. Thank you for closing the door. We actually have a new team that we're built at Microsoft, and I can show you a little bit about that. The developer advocates, you'll probably hear, you might have seen in the news, we've been hiring a lot of people who are sort of non-traditional Microsoft people. Ashley McNamara from Pivotal, and Brian Liston from AWS, a bunch of guys. Donovan Brown's a really good DevOps guy. Chris Nova specializes in Linux. Paige is amazing for ML and stuff like that. And we are hiring, so if anyone's interested, we are hiring. You get to travel the world and work from home, and we talk about non-Microsoft technologies to people. So I work with the Java community, and you can find me on Twitter at Benz if you want to follow along or live tweet. So today I'm going to talk about specifically Eclipse platform and deployment options. We have web apps and containers basically, and I'll explain what those are in a little bit. Then we'll talk about enhancing apps with SDKs that we've built and some services that we have built into Azure as well. So first thing, Eclipse platform and deployment options. We have plugins. So we have a couple of Eclipse plugins. You download them, you install them. And I'm going through this quicker than I normally would. I'd actually usually show this, but basically you guys are familiar with installation of Eclipse. Once you have it installed, the plugin, you have several options that you can use. We have Application Insights, which is a tool that you can use. You put an instrumentation key into your web apps folder in Tomcat, for example, and it automatically populates what we call a Power BI. How many people are familiar with Power BI here? Okay, it's a analytics dashboard that is automatic, and it's free up to a certain point. So you can just add an instrumentation key to your web apps, and all of a sudden you've got a whole bunch of telemetry on your applications. We also are working heavily with Docker. So our Eclipse plugin does a couple of things. You can start Docker. You can test things locally. You can also push images to containers that are running on Azure through our thing called Azure Container Services. We also have another one called Azure Container Instances, which is a quick way to fire up and shut down containers. You can also publish to web apps, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. You can also publish as a Docker container. The Docker container gets packaged up and deployed to a Linux web app. Now, what are web apps? Let's go in and have a look at that. This is my Azure portal, and when I say new, it's a little bit slow to load. So it's the Wi-Fi here. So when I say new and I go to web and mobile, there's a couple things here. So a web app is basically a quick way to fire up a web application. Azure, is our cloud. It's got virtual machines, which everyone's familiar with, I'm sure, by this point. It also has web apps, and that's what I'm talking about now. Our app service is something that you can use to run containers or Windows applications. The containers are all Docker, and they run on Ubuntu Linux. So anything that you've got that's in a container, you can deploy it out to Ubuntu Linux really quickly. So I can do something like web app for containers. If I click here, it will actually eventually create. It's taking a little longer than I hoped. All right, everyone stop checking their messages. It's taking too long. Let me just refresh this quick. See if this is going to be a problem. New. web and mobile, web app for containers. There we go. I don't know what happened there. So I can create a web app name like Eclipse Con 2017, and then set up my account. Whenever you create something in Azure, you create this thing called a resource group, which is a way of grouping things together on the cloud so you can manage them and delete them and do all the things you want to do with them. And then we have an app service plan, and then you can configure the container. There's a few different ways you can configure the container through the Azure Container Registry, which is our service. It's a private hub. Just like Docker Hub, it's private. You can actually set it up quickly. You can go to Docker Hub and you can do something like, say I want to do a Tomcat container. I can just say Tomcat, and by this little check mark, we know that there is one. So if I say Jetty, and this is going out and getting the standard Docker images, and then it would create one. I could do public or private from here, or if I have another private registry that's available via URI, I can get that as well. So it's just a quick way of creating containers. So let's say OK here. And it's going to actually go out and create a Jetty container for me. In this case, it's going to do it in West Europe, because that's where I have my default app service set up. But we have 43 locations all over the world for Azure, which is pretty cool. And once I say create, it's actually going to create a web app for Linux out there. And let me show you one that I already created, actually. Dashboard. And let's go to Tomcat websites demo. Where is it? Oh, okay. It actually created this one for me. So what I did is there's a link here. When I create this EclipseCon 2017, this web app, it should fire up. When I click on the link, sometimes it takes a minute, and I think the Wi-Fi is really slow here too. So I'll get back to that. So my app services, let's go there quick, because I want to show you one that I've already created. Tomcat websites demo. So there's a couple things you can do with this. So I've got one here. It's a web app on Linux. And basically what I can do with this is scale. So you can automatically scale things out. Let's see here. So scale up will give you different plans, and those have costs associated with them. Scale out allows you to scale your web apps easily with rules. In this case, I've got a default rule set up. When my CPU percentage, on average, gets over 80%, it'll create another instance of this web app on another container and basically horizontally scale for you. When it drops below 60%, it'll delete one of those containers. Now, this is completely configurable. I can say how many, if I wanted to increase or decrease by 5 containers, I can do that as well. And you can schedule things, so you can say if you know your web apps on Monday morning are busier, you can schedule it automatically. Monday morning, fire up 10 more containers and horizontally scale them. It's all completely transparent and hidden to the users. So everything's managed for you, basically, when you want to do that. Of course, you could do VMs, and we have these things called VM scale sets, which are similar, but they give you much more control over the operating system and things like that. This is sort of more of a sandboxed way to actually roll things out. So that's a little bit about web apps. So I mentioned we have VMs. This is sort of our sandboxed web app version of that. And we have a Windows version too, if you're interested. Generally in Eclipse, most of the people are looking for Linux solutions, so that's the one I wanted to highlight here. The next thing you can do, I'll show you a little demo here, deploying to the cloud. So how do you actually get your code out to one of those web apps? Yeah.
Quick question, like when you were demonstrating that, creating your environment, you got to that through the Eclipse plugin?
No. You can get the Eclipse plugin. I just wanted to show you what a web app was, and now I'm going to show you here. So once you have the web app installed,
okay.
Yeah. Yep. So once you have the web app installed, you can create an app and you can deploy it to one of those web apps. And this is the code for this. Is just a simple, dead simple web project in Eclipse. And I just created one JSP, and it says Hello Azure. So I'll just change that to Hello Ludwigsburg. Let's do that. Hopefully I spelled that right. I think so. Let's save that. Now all I have to do now, because I've installed this plugin, you have several things going on here, and I'll explain what those are in a bit. But to deploy this out, I want to do this now because sometimes it takes a few minutes. Once you've installed the plugin, you've got all the links down here. So if I say publish as a Azure web app, and I choose the latest one that I just created earlier, so it wouldn't take too much time. I can also create a new one, which takes a little more time. And I hit deploy. It's actually, if you look down here on the bottom right, it's going to deploy that web app. It packages it up and sends it out to the web apps that I just showed you. So you can manually create them and scale them, or you can actually go in here and do this through Eclipse as well. When you do it through Eclipse, it just creates one web app for you, and then you have to go in and do what I showed you earlier about scaling and setting things up for yourself. And you have complete control over the Tomcat version, the JDK version, JDK version, and also if you're working with Azure services, we have these SDKs as well. You can control those versions as well. We use Azure OpenJDK by default, so we have probably 60 or 70 specific point installations of OpenJDK out there through our partnership with Azure, which are ready to go. And that's about it. So this is going to go for a while. I'll come back to this in a bit, just because it might take a bit of time. I tried it earlier, and it took about 4 or 5 minutes. It all depends on the Wi-Fi, because it has to package it and send it out, and the upload Wi-Fi might be a little bit slow, which it is right now. So I actually showed you this already. The Azure App Service on Linux is what we're actually deploying to here, and you have 3 options for that. You have the built-in private registry you can use. You can go out to Docker Hub and grab images, and you also have the Docker Hub and private registry, non-Azure private registry too. So the other thing I want to talk about, let's see if this is done yet. No, still working away. It's the upload time. It's usually when I'm at the office or at home, it takes a couple of seconds because I've got a better upload time than we do here. So enhancing apps with SDKs and services. So I just showed you how you can deploy something. Azure also has all these services that you can use. Storage, Key Vault for keeping secrets and keys, Resource Manager for maintaining VMs and web apps and things like this. This can all be done through different programming languages. SQL database, data lake management. You can see all the services we have there. All of these work with GitHub, and all of them run on Linux. So let me just show you a little bit about that. Did this get finished? Nope. I'll check it back again. So we have 2 places you can learn more about services and things. We have the Java Developer Center, which I'll send you a link. It's azure.com/Java. And we have all kinds of info on building things with Eclipse and IntelliJ. Oh, by the way, all the functionality that we have in Eclipse works with IntelliJ as well. Also, different images that we have built for you, and some examples. This is a colleague of mine. A few other things, and then so you can figure out what you can do with Azure on the Dev Center, and then we also have this documentation center. It's called the Documentation Hub, and I'll send links for this. And it tells you, it's a bunch of tutorials on how you can actually get started, a collection of 5-minute quick starts that you can use to get started as well, and we actually have Java support for functions as well that we just created. And that's if you're familiar with AWS Lambda, or the serverless functions that they have on AWS, we have an equivalent to that now. We have Java support for that. We just announced it Java 1. So there's a few things you can do. The SDKs, if I go up here, the SDKs themselves allow you to create VMs, manage containers, create storage, and things like that. You can do that using Java, and there's another way you can do that as well, which is, oh, this is still deploying. Oh boy. Let me go back into my portal here. So this is my portal. One of the cool things we have, well, a couple cool things we have. How many people use a Windows machine to develop code here? A couple? Okay. So you probably know about the Windows subsystem for Linux. We also have a CLI. So the Windows subsystem for Linux you can use to run Linux commands, Bash, and also our Azure CLI. And our Azure CLI, the command line interface runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac. So it's available on all of them. We also, it's a cool thing about the CLI, we've been heavily investing in containers. I just clicked on the little icon here. Now, if you don't have the CLI installed on your local machine, which I mentioned it on Windows, Mac, or Linux, it's easy to get. It's kind of hard to see over here, but we actually, right now, this is creating a Cloud Shell for me, and it has the Azure CLI, Cloud Foundry, Bash, Tmux, a bunch of other things, all pre-configured on your portal. So here I am. I'm logged into my. It also logs you in automatically because it knows what account you're in because you're in the portal. So now I can do AZ for the CLI. I could do kube control. That's there. Whoops. It'd be good if I spelled it right. So kube control is there. Cloud Foundry CLI is built in. A bunch of different CLIs are built in. So if you have Bash scripts that you've already created, you've invested in, a lot of our customers do, we actually have this command line that you can fire up and you do things with. The only thing you can't do with this command line is have access to your local machine. Even though it's running in the browser, it's running on a container out on Azure, but it's nice. It's pre-configured. You can also store your own CLIs. There's a way to do that. If you have a specific CLI that you use that we don't have on here, you can actually store them as part of a add-on container image that will be added into this as well. So you can use your own Bash scripts. You can go and get things from, usually what I do with this is I'll put something on GitHub, and then I'll do a git fetch to actually bring it into the container here, and then I'll do something like az vm create. I'll create a VM, and here's all the options that we have for creating a VM. It's really well documented, so if you don't know something, you do az vm create -h. It gives you all the different options. It even gives you some examples of how to use it down here at the bottom. But generally, I already have my scripts that I've built. I use environment variables to choose a resource group and the name of the VM that I'm going to use. And I fire up the script, and I can run it from here, grab something from GitHub, fire up a VM, put that GitHub image on the VM, configure some ports and things, and then fire up the VM and have something running in a couple of minutes. And I don't need anything on my local machine. Even cooler, there's an Azure app you can get. I don't have time to show it here, but there's an actual Azure app you can get which has a CLI built into it as well. So you can do all this from your phone now. It's pretty cool. It's pretty amazing stuff. So look for the Azure app. If you have an Azure account already, it's easy to set up. All right, let's go and check and see if this, yes. Oh, great. It didn't go. All right, I'm going to try it again. Azure. Deploy as Azure web app. I had that happen in my hotel earlier today too. By the way, this morning, I just got here, I'm jet lagged. I go to get my laptop this morning and it won't start. It would not fire up, which is really bad because I had Eclipse and everything, of course, configured and ready to go. And my slides, I hadn't backed them up. So it was a little freaky. But hopefully this will get going in the next 10 minutes. But it turns out it was just the power adapter. I've used this as about 3 years old and had too much dust accumulated inside. So I had to take a toothbrush and scrape it out. But anyway, it's a good way to wake you up in the morning. My laptop won't start, and I don't know why. Oh, man. Okay. Let me try this again. This is honestly, this is the Wi-Fi. I'm blaming the Wi-Fi here because I've done this many times. Yeah, anyway, we'll see how that goes. So anyway, that's a little bit about services, and you can use the Azure CLI. It's very well documented to actually control most of the Azure services we have. So the idea here is you can take an app you already have. You can use the Eclipse plugin to deploy it out to a web app. You can play around with it. And then if you need something more, if you need virtual machines or a cluster of virtual machines, you can create what we call VM scale sets. And those are managed and easy to use. And then once you're beyond that, so you can take, for example, if you have a MongoDB application running Tomcat, you put one VM with Tomcat, one VM with MongoDB, you connect the two together. And then, if you want to take it to the next level, you can replace MongoDB with our Cosmos DB application on the back end. That's what we call a multi-model database. You can use SQL, you can use NoSQL, you can use tables, you can use storage. It's all kinds of things built into one, and it's extremely scalable. We actually use it for a lot of our own Office applications. OneNote is actually built on top of Cosmos DB. Is anyone familiar with OneNote here, actually? Okay, a couple of you. Yeah, it's sort of like, it's a way to manage and share information in a non-structured way. So we have this Cosmos DB, it's scalable. And then you can take your application and put it in a scale set, a VM scale set, or use web apps, if that's okay too, if you don't need as much control over the operating system and things like that. All right, let's check. I'm just dying to see if this is, oh man, I don't know why it's doing that. Let me just check something else. I just want to see if the web is working in general. It's working. All right. I'm going to try it one more time. Deploy. So I published this already. As you can see here, I did this morning. Let's see. When was this? Yeah, these are all this morning. I tried a few things out. I was playing with some things. I wanted to try and put a GIF in there, but it wouldn't let me do it. So, but it's out there and it's running. And right now, it's probably not going to run. There's one that I did earlier today, but that's faking it. I don't want to do that. So hopefully this web app deploys. I don't know what happened there. So I mentioned the Azure CLI. It's a Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's built in Python and it's open source. You can find it on the web. GitHub is one of the biggest, Microsoft is one of the biggest contributors now to GitHub. We have, if you look at what they call State of the Octaverse, which is GitHub publishes every year, we were actually the #1 contributor to repos this year. All our documentation is written in GitHub and in Markdown. So if you have issues, if you go in and check our docs, for example, if you go in and check our Developer Center here, oh, here's one, the Azure Toolkit for Eclipse. So this is actually some of our tutorials and things. Let's see, deploy containers to Azure VMs. So we have a way to do that. But you can actually go in here. If you look at the actual article, let me find a different one. Deploy your first web app to Azure. If you click on the edit button, you can actually submit a pull request or report an issue if you have issues with these. They're all on GitHub and they're all documented, so it's kind of cool. It's a whole system we have for keeping track of the docs. All right, let's go back here and see if this worked. No, it's still deploying though. That's good. Okay. Yeah, and the other thing I want to tell you, so we also have MySQL services now, a managed service for MySQL, a managed service for Postgres, and MongoDB. We have this thing in the portal that I'll show you. if I go into the portal here, and go to the top, say new. Okay, Mongo. So I mentioned the, for example, if you just want to show some examples with MongoDB, we have this thing called Database as a Service for MongoDB. So if you're using MongoDB in the back end of your application, you can plug it into Cosmos DB, which is our hugely scalable MongoDB compatible service. You just change your connection string, and you've got MongoDB running. Same with our MySQL service. If you look at the MySQL service, there's several different options here. So I can create a Bitnami virtual machine that has MySQL pre-configured for me and everything up and running, and just connect to it with a connection string. I can use we have a partner called ClearDB who has a service. We also have Azure database for MySQL. And once again, to get these things working, it's just a question of changing your connection string from whatever. Let's say you have a VM that you're already using for MySQL, or MongoDB for that matter. You just change the connection string and point it to the new location, and basically it'll keep running as long as you have your data on there, of course, but it'll keep running the way you expect, but now you have a scalable service that you can use for that. Yeah, and here's a web app. This is a web mobile, so I mentioned web apps before. This is a web app with MySQL built into the back end, ready to go, and it's all pre-configured through some wizards that you get when you set it up. All right. Did this actually go? No, not yet. Still deploying the web app. Okay, fingers crossed. We still have a couple of minutes here. So more resources. Yeah, so we actually have some DevOps tools as well. We've been working with the Jenkins Foundation. Jenkins, how many people here use Jenkins? Okay, everybody uses Jenkins, good. Jenkins is actually working with us. They came to us a couple of years ago. Kosuke Kawaguchi and Tyler Croy came to us and actually wanted Kosuke is the creator of Jenkins, and Tyler Croy manages the Jenkins Foundation development. He's in charge of all the infrastructure. So we donated some money to them, and they're actually putting their Jenkins infrastructure on Azure. And delivering, so the actual thing that is used by the Jenkins Foundation to build Jenkins is running on Azure right now. And one of the reasons they liked us was our locations. Let me see. Nope, still not done. Let me see here. Azure regions. So we have so many regions. So one of the things they liked about us is we have this thing called the CDN Content Delivery Network that you can use in all of our 43 regions. So he automatically has an endpoint in all these different regions for downloading Jenkins. And it's really nice and efficient the way he's got it distributed. So when they build a new Jenkins build, it actually gets distributed to multiple endpoints all over the world based on this map here. And people can download it locally. It takes a lot less time to do that, and I wish we had that kind of facility for this right now. But anyway, it's an easy way to sort of deliver their Jenkins. So whenever you're downloading Jenkins, you're downloading it from one of those endpoints that I showed there on the map. So we've worked with them. We've got a couple of plugins. So if you want to deploy artifacts, you can deploy them to storage. You can deploy them to VMs, and we have how many people are familiar with Jenkins masters and agents? Probably everybody, yeah. So basically, we have a plugin that allows you to create agents that are virtual machines on Azure, and they can be fired up and shut down based on templates. You can put them in a dormant mode or delete them completely when you're done with them, so you can reuse them quickly or save money just by shutting them down completely. Now we've worked with Jenkins to build those. I mentioned App Insights for Java. We have that, and then we have Visual Studio Team Services, which is a way to manage. It's a Team Foundation service, which is an old Microsoft product. We've put it online and we've enhanced it greatly, and it allows you to do things like if you have a team that works with Python and .NET and Java, You can manage the programming tasks and coordinate the programming tasks, and people can check in code, and that can actually trigger Jenkins builds, because we do have a plugin for Jenkins for VSTS. It's something to check out if you're interested. It's free up to, I think, 5 users, and we have the most important thing, free private Git repos. Not GitHub, but free private Git repos, unlimited for, I think, up to 5 developers through VSTS as well. Okay, did it go? Well, guys, I don't know what to say here. It's taking too long. I did have this problem earlier today with my hotel room, but not here. I tried it just a little while ago, and it did work. There's what I published. But it's not working now. Anyway. Yeah, so we have the Java Dev Center that I mentioned, and I'll share these slides later. The Java and Azure docs that I showed you, you can look at our blog for announcements. And we have the Developer Advocates link as well. And please follow me on Twitter, and you can also email me, bbenz@microsoft.com. And if you want to ask questions either way, it's fine with me. And I think we just have 3 minutes for questions. So does anyone have any questions about that? I guess the question could be, did this finish, Brian? No, it didn't. Yeah, go for it.
Is there some kind of container orchestration built in Azure, or do you roll on kubernetes cluster similar?
Yes, we have Azure Container Services. So the question was, do we have orchestration built into our container services? Yes, Azure Container Services. So we we work with all the cool kids. So Docker, of course, DCOS, Docker Swarm, or Kubernetes. So DCOS, Swarm, or Kubernetes is what we use for orchestration, and it's built in. For example, if you go into the Azure CLI, it actually manages this as well, so you can do everything through the CLI. You can create a VM, you can create a bunch of containers, you can coordinate them with Kubernetes, and you can deploy them to a VM or to our app service if you want to have it automatically scalable. But that is built in. Let's see here. Maybe we have documentation. Yes. So let's start with Kubernetes, because that's what everyone's doing these days. We have a well-documented deploy Kubernetes cluster for Linux containers. And it's pretty easy to do. We've got a little sample app there. And this one shows you what I showed you earlier, where it says launch Azure Cloud Shell. So you create the Cloud Shell in your portal. You create the resource group, and then there's Kubernetes cluster you can create. This is the command for that, ACS create, Azure Container Service create, orchestrator type Kubernetes, resource group, and then the name of your cluster. And you generate the SSH keys. kubectl is built in when you do this to our Azure Container Service. So once you've actually created this, started it up, fired it up, got some Docker containers that you've dropped into Kubernetes, you can actually start using kubectl right away to manage the Kubernetes cluster as well. So yeah, it's there. And it's through the portal or through the CLI as well. And we also have the SDKs and things, so you can control that through Java as well. All right, we got 1 minute left. Let's see if it worked. Sorry, that did not work. All right. Back that. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, we have a booth here. If you want to check us out, we're on the far end of the building over in the corner. And I'll be around all afternoon today, tomorrow. And if anyone has any more questions, let me know. I'll be around. So let's check one more time. Did it go? It didn't go. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it's taking so long, but normally it takes about 3-4 minutes, and it deploys. Honest, it really does. And even for a big package, it packages everything up. It sends it, drops it to the web app as a container for Linux. So, yeah. So, thank you. Thanks.